Hi everyone, Peter here from Flow High Performance, and in this video we will be covering how volume quality influences hypertrophy adaptations. First, let's establish what is meant by volume quality. Volume quality refers to how stimulative each set of an exercise is for muscle growth. So the higher the quality of each set, the more muscle growth that will occur per unit of volume. There are a few training factors which can determine the volume quality of each set. Let's now explore what these are. The first factor which contributes to volume quality is technique. So why is technique so important for volume quality? Well, essentially, if we use a strict technique where the target muscle is the limiting factor, then we are placing maximal tension on that muscle group and that muscle group only. If we use poor lifting technique for an exercise, we may run into some issues. One issue is that we may use more weight than we require, which is unnecessarily systemically fatiguing for no extra stimulus to the target muscle. For example, let's say a trainee performs a stiff leg deadlift with more weight than they can handle strictly, causing them to bend the knees more and slightly round the spine. This exercise will now involve higher cardiovascular demands, more stress on the spinal erectors, and take more mental effort to perform. So the exercise becomes much more fatiguing and doesn't actually induce any more stimulus to the hamstring muscles. Second, using suboptimal technique may reduce tension on the target muscles during certain portions of the range of motion. For example, let's say a trainee uses momentum to swing the dumbbells up at the bottom of a bicep curl. This reduces the tension on the biceps in the bottom half of the range, making each rep and each set potentially less stimulative. The next factor that influences volume quality is proximity to failure. This refers to a rough estimate of how close each set is taken before the trainee hits failure. Generally speaking, we want to take each set fairly close to failure to maximize hypertrophy. This ensures that all muscle fibers are recruited and actually trained to a significant extent. If we leave too many reps in the tank, then we simply aren't getting the most out of each set. As a practical guideline, the majority of training in the 6 to 12 rep range should take each set around 1 to 2 reps in reserve. When training with higher rep ranges in the 12 to 20 plus range, trainees should take each set around 0 to 1 reps in reserve. The last factor which contributes to volume quality is exercise selection. To maximize the effectiveness of each set, we need to ensure that the exercises we implement stimulate the target muscles well. So how do we know if the exercise we are performing actually stimulates the muscles we are trying to train? There are 3 main methods to do this. First is the anatomy of the muscle and what movements it performs. This will give us a basic knowledge of how the muscle moves and a range of exercises which involve resistance against those movements. For example, let's use the lats. The lats primarily perform shoulder adduction and shoulder extension. In other words, when the arm is above the head, the lats can bring the arm down to the side or down straight in front of the body. So any exercise which involves shoulder adduction or extension will be using the lats. This includes any rowing variations and any vertical pulling variations. So first and foremost, we need to make sure the exercises we select actually stimulate the target muscle from an anatomical perspective. Once we know the basic biomechanics of the muscle we are trying to target, we now need to select the exercise that stimulates the target muscle best for you as an individual. One method of assessing this is using the mind-muscle connection. If a trainee feels a strong mind-muscle connection with the muscles they are trying to train, then that exercise is likely more stimulative than a similar exercise where the trainee feels a weak connection. It should be noted that the mind-muscle connection is probably more valid for controlled isolation movements rather than compound free weight lifts. For example, let's say a trainee wants to select an isolation exercise for the chest. This trainee knows that they need to perform some form of chest fly, but which one is best to implement? Maybe for this trainee, dumbbell flies don't feel particularly great on the chest, they simply don't get that sense of contraction. Then they try cable flies instead, and they feel a full stretch in the chest at the bottom range and a strong contraction at the top. The cable fly in this instance may simply be a better exercise choice for this trainee to get the most stimulus for the chest. And the last indicator of an effective exercise is muscle soreness. If the trainee feels soreness in the muscle they trained a day or 2 earlier, then the exercise was probably effective at stimulating that particular muscle group. While soreness is not a direct measure of muscle growth, it can be a good general indicator of stimulative training. It is best to assess an effective exercise using all 3 of these indicators, rather than just a single one. So if an exercise makes sense biomechanically, the trainee feels a good mind-muscle connection during the lift, and they experience some slight muscle soreness in the target muscles the following day, then that is a good sign the exercise was stimulative. So now that we understand what volume quality is and what factors contribute to making a particular set effective, we now need to understand why volume quality is important for hypertrophy training. There is one primary reason that we want to make volume quality as high as possible. This is due to our finite recovery capacity. There is a limit to how much we can train, and training more than this will breach our systemic recovery capacity. Because of this, we need to make every single set of exercise as stimulative as possible to maximize how much hypertrophy we can achieve with a certain volume. Let's use an example to demonstrate this point. Let's take two trainees who theoretically have the same systemic recovery capacity. Let's say both trainees perform the following volumes for each muscle group: 18 sets for the chest, 18 sets for the back, 16 sets for the quads, 12 sets for the hamstrings, 12 sets for the biceps, 10 sets for the triceps, and 12 sets for the calves. Let's say this is the highest volume that both these trainees can recover and adapt to. Now let's say trainee A performs lower quality volume. This means that their technique is sloppy, they don't take each set close enough to failure, and their exercise selection isn't the most effective for each muscle group. With the volume they perform, they may receive a decent hypertrophy stimulus, but probably not the most effective. Now let's look at trainee B. This trainee performs every set with strict and effective technique, takes each set close to failure, and selects the exercises that best stimulate each muscle group specifically for themselves based on trial and error. This trainee now achieves a greater hypertrophy stimulus with the same amount of volume. So in the long term, trainee B will likely achieve greater muscle growth than trainee A. So before increasing volume, first ensure that you are getting the maximum stimulus out of each set with the current volume you are using. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you got something out of this video. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already.